What do you belong to? Where do you find your sense of belonging? Do you feel as though your belonging is fragile? Like one failure, one secret, one awkward story could just shut you out? I just want to point out something today, that holiness is not about purity, or not just about purity. It's about who gets to live near God's presence. And in Deuteronomy chapter 23, we're going to unpack who may enter the assembly, how the camp is kept clean, and why God cares about integrity in public life. In this episode of Biblical Unlocks, this show is designed to help build your habit of reading the Bible, understanding the Bible, and applying it in your daily life. If you enjoy episodes like this, please consider following and rating the show. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. And I just wanted to say thank you, because we hit 21 subscribers on YouTube, so 20 subscribers. I think that's pretty cool. The reason why I'm saying that is because the last time I made a YouTube channel was way back when I was like 7 years. No. How old was I? I think I was like 12 years old or something. And it was a little channel. Like I would upload some facts about some stuff, and I would upload it to my little YouTube channel. And I think the highest number of subscribers I ever got to was 20, and that's because I got all my family and friends to subscribe to me. But no one in my family and friends actually know I do this, so that's pretty cool. So I'm happy. I'm happy that we've managed to reach that. Okay, so that being said, let's get a little bit of context into this chapter. So, Deuteronomy chapter 23, what does it do? It gives rules about admission into the assembly, camp purity, and the exclusion of shameful practices. So, the treatment of the poor and foreigner, and integrity in vows, loans, and harvest ethics. So, the chapter is going to show that God's people are not a random crowd. They are a holy community with boundaries, mercy, and public responsibility. Okay, so we're going to read the first 8 verses. The focus here is going to be on who can enter the assembly and why does belonging have boundaries in God's people. Verse 1, no one whose testicles are crushed or whose penis is cut off shall come into the assembly of the Lord. Those born of an illicit union shall not come into the assembly of the Lord. Even to the 10th generation, none of their descendants shall come into the assembly of the Lord. No Ammonite or Moabite shall come into the assembly of the Lord. Even to the 10th generation, none of their descendants shall come into the assembly of the Lord forever, because they did not meet you with food and water on your journey out of Egypt, and because they hired against you Balaam son of Beor from Pethor of Mesopotamia to curse you. Yet the Lord your God refused to heed Balaam. The Lord your God turned the curse into a blessing for you, because the Lord your God loved you. You shall never promote their welfare or their prosperity as long as you lived. You shall not abhor any of the Edomites, for they are your kin. You shall not abhor any of the Egyptians, because you were an alien residing in their land. The children of the 3rd generation that are born to them may come into the assembly of the Lord. Okay, I know what you're thinking. Okay, so biblical unlock number 1. What is going on here? Okay, why are these people not allowed to enter the assembly of the Lord? I think 3 things are helpful to understand this. The first one is we need to look at the historical, cultural, and theological context, and we'll look at each one of these in particular. What does assembly of the Lord mean, right? No one whose testicles are cut off or crushed and whose penis is cut off shall enter the assembly of the Lord. Okay, what is the assembly of the Lord? This phrase refers to formal participation in Israel's religious and civic life, especially in leadership authorities or even full covenant membership. So it's not just attending worship, that's important. The passage is about who could fully belong to the covenant community in an official sense at that time. This is important. Second thing, the exclusion of men with damaged genitals. Why are they excluded? That's because of ritual purity and wholeness and the symbolic importance of the body, which is tied to fertility and lineage. So the point that's been made here is that in the ancient Near East, physical completeness was often associated with being fit for sacred roles. So it's not that you're not morally worth anything. We know in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 to 27, all are created in the image of God. What this is about is ritual standards that Israel uses to distinguish itself from other communities. Second thing is, in verse 2 it says that those born of an illicit union, right, shall not come into the assembly of the Lord. Why? Because this is likely referring to children born of relationships considered outside Israel's covenant laws. So this could have been incestuous or forbidden unions, and the restriction emphasizes the importance of family structure and covenant boundaries. And it says to the 10th generation. Why to the 10th generation? Because it's a way of saying this is long-lasting exclusion. This is not just a literal count, okay? This is important because it is referring to the continuity of the community. And then the last thing, the Ammonites and the Moabites, they are definitely not allowed to enter. Why? Because they refused to help Israel during the Exodus journey. We saw that explained. And because of their attempts to curse Israel. So this is a rule that reflects the historical conflict between them and a desire to protect Israel from the outside religious influences. But is this permanent? No, this is not permanent. Ruth, we're going to read Ruth. Ruth is a Moabite, and yet she becomes part of Israel, and even an ancestor of King David. What about in the book of Isaiah, chapter 56, verse 3 to 5? Foreigners and eunuchs can be welcomed by God. That's what it says. So, there is development over time within the biblical the traditions, right? And the idea here is that these laws are a part of an ancient legal system that is meant to shape Israel's identity, okay? And the identity is what is important. Okay, let's read verses 9 to 18 now. I'm going to do the next section. This is going to be on camp holiness and sanitation, refuge for escaped servants, and the fact that there should be no cult prostitution, no wage from impurity, okay? My questions for you to stay engaged is, why does God care about cleanliness and hidden waste? How does the law protect vulnerable people, even across borders? And why is worship linked to sexual and economic integrity? Let's read verses 9 to 18. Let's read. Verse 9. When you are encamped against your enemies, you shall guard against every evil thing. If one of you becomes unclean because of a nocturnal emission, then he shall go outside the camp. He must not come within the camp. When evening comes, he shall wash himself with water, and when the sun has set, he may come back into the camp. You shall have a designated area outside the camp to which you shall go. With your tools you shall have a trowel. When you relieve yourself outside, you shall dig a hole with it, and then cover up your excrements, because the Lord your God travels along with your camp to save you, and to hand over your enemies to you. Therefore your camp must be holy, so that he may not see anything indecent among you, and turn away from you. You shall not return to their owners, slaves who have escaped to you from their owners. They shall reside with you, in your midst, in any place they choose, in any one of your towns, wherever they please, you shall not oppress them. Verse 17, none of the daughters of Israel shall serve in an illicit shrine. None of the sons of Israel shall serve in an illicit shrine. You shall not bring the fee of a prostitute or the wages of a dog into the house of the Lord your God in payment for any vow, for both of these are abhorrent to the Lord your God. Alright, biblical unlock number 2. So, first and foremost, from verses 9 to 14, we saw that God cares about bodily cleanness and what happens outside the camp. Okay, why? Because God dwells in the midst of the people. Even hidden impurity matters. So, the camp must be ordered so that what is unclean does not become normal. And the text is actually joining holiness to ordinary sanitation. Private bodily acts and public space are both a part of covenant life. You may have thought that those requests about excretion outside the camp and discharges and all of these sorts of things, it's weird. Why are we being told this? Deuteronomy includes laws, sanitary, ritual, and humanitarian precepts, and we need to be able to recognize that, again, the Bible is written for us, but not to us. We're not the original recipient of this text, which means these would have served a vital role in the sanitation of the community present here. Second thing, we saw that we must protect the runaway servant. This is pretty interesting, right? You shall not return to their slave owners, those who have escaped to you from their owners. They shall reside with you in your midst, in any place they choose, in any one of your towns, wherever they please. You shall not oppress them. Very interesting. A very humane law that refuses to hand over someone fleeing oppression. It actually creates refuge rather than forcing them to return, which is especially where the foreign servant is being mistreated. So the chapter here is actually balancing order with mercy. Belonging must never become a tool for abuse. And the last thing is, no cult prostitution, no wage from impurity. That's very interesting right here. And why? Why is this the case? Because it corrupts worship and economy. The chapter is refusing to let sexual sin be monetized in the name of religion. No, God will not receive money gained by degrading human dignity, the very beings that are marked with the image of God, right? So worship and money must agree with holiness. Okay, let's read the final section of the chapter, final 6 verses, 19 to 25. This is going to be on honest loans, vows, and neighborly generosity. And my question for you to stay engaged is, how do money and speech reveal covenant character? Let's read verse 19. You shall not charge interest on loans to another Israelite, interest on money, interest on provisions, interest on anything that is lent. On loans to a foreigner you may charge interest, but on loans to another Israelite you must not charge interest, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all your undertakings in the land that you are about to enter and possess. If you make a vow to the Lord your God, do not postpone fulfilling it, for the Lord your God will surely require it of you, and you would incur guilt. But if you refrain from vowing, you will not incur guilt. Whatever your lips utter, you must diligently perform, just as you have freely vowed to the Lord your God with your own mouth. If you go into your neighbor's vineyard, you may eat your fill of grapes, as many as you wish, but you shall not put any in a container. If you go into your neighbor's standing grain, you may pluck the ears with your hand, but you shall not put a sickle to your neighbor's standing grain. Final biblical unlock. What do loans, vows, and food laws have in common? They all test integrity. God cares how you use your words, how you use your money, appetite, and whatever. The holy life is one where power is used for mercy and not advantage, right? And that often love fulfills the law when it seeks the good of the other person. I just want to point out something as well, because I think this is quite fascinating. Like, people could read this section and think to themselves, well, hang on a minute. Well, why did Christians use interest now, right? There are many modern banking systems that use interest, right? But it's very important to recognize the difference between what this law originally meant, who it was meant for, and why Christians don't follow it literally today. In ancient Israel, this is not about modern banking, okay? It was about protecting vulnerable people, because in the ancient Near East, loans were usually given to the poor, not for business or investment. So charging interest could trap someone in permanent debt or slavery. So the rule basically meant, don't profit off your fellow Israelites' hardship. And allowing interest for foreigners made a distinction between the internal community care and external trade, right? Which were common practices in the ancient world. And the reason why Christians don't follow it literally today is because this was a part of a specific law in a specific society, and not as a universal economic system for all nations. Many of the Old Testament civil laws are not binding today in the same way. Additionally, modern loans are very different, okay? For investment, whether you're buying a house, starting a business, it's all regulated, and it's meant to prevent extreme exploitation. But exploitative interest, like usury, I think it's called, that is still considered wrong, okay? And reasonable interest, which is given in a fair system, is generally acceptable, okay? So, instead of following a strict rule like no interest is ever allowed, the emphasis is on not exploiting people financially. Don't trap other people into debt. Now, some Christians regard, interest is wrong outright, but there is a difference between unjust exploitation and legitimate finance. Okay, let's see how this chapter fulfills Jesus Christ. Okay, so Deuteronomy chapter 23 teaches that holiness is public, ordered, and humane. In Christ, all those boundaries are fulfilled, not by a smaller community, but by a more truthful one. Jesus is the one who gathers the unclean, the outsider, the poor, the ashamed, yet he never calls holiness irrelevant. Instead, he creates a people whose belonging is marked by mercy, honesty, and a clean conscience before God, which is why he says, let your word be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything more than this comes from the evil one. What it shows is that the concern we have about vows, words, and integrity can be diluted, or not diluted, perhaps simplified into a much more easy to understand rule, which is let your speech match your covenant life. Okay, how can we apply this chapter every day, in our everyday lives? I think having integrity and boundaries, that's a good thing, okay? So you have to sort of watch yourself when you're making promises, making commitments, having loans as well, right? So we talked about interest. There's a difference between exploitation and fairness, okay? So you need to be very careful. Now, usually, if someone is actually engaging in exploitive practices, you're not going to say, oh, well, yes, I'm doing this because for the sake of being exploiting, or like for the sake of exploiting someone else. Usually people have reasons why they're doing this, right? And they end up justifying it to such an extent that they forget the negative consequences of their actions. So you need to instead ask yourself, like what Jesus says, is my speech matching my action? Because I feel like that is the deeper significance behind what is going on. And second thing, have boundaries. That's just the important thing, okay? You need to have boundaries. Because there are going to be areas in your life which become messy, unclean, whether you don't have digital habits or calendar, your calendar's all over the place, your finances are all over the place. You need to clean it up deliberately. Have boundaries that you're going to put in so that you keep your life in order, okay? And this is life advice, but it's also straight from the Bible. Alright, well, that's it for this episode of Biblical Unlocked. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to rate the show and follow. We learned that belonging in God's people is meaningful and ordered, that holiness reaches into sanitation, body, speech, money, and worship, and that the vulnerable must be protected, not exploited, even by financial laws, and that worship and economics cannot be separated from moral integrity. God's covenant people are called to visible honesty and mercy. Next episode, we're moving from the ordered belonging to compassion in the margins in Deuteronomy chapter 24. We're going to look at the law on divorce, wages, gleaning, and why justice must remember the weak. You don't want to miss it. And why is this important next week? Because Jesus is the one who is going to be quizzed on Deuteronomy chapter 24, right? On this very law of divorce. So we're going to see how he responds to that. So anyway, if you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to rate the show and follow. It's free, it helps me a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Otherwise, just have a blessed day. And remember, if you're not in your word, you're in your feelings. Godspeed. And thank you for 21 subscribers on YouTube. Really appreciate it. Okay, I'll see you guys later.